Well, hello. My name's Chester, and my last name is Machniewski, but for some reason everybody calls me Chester. And I'm living in a wonderful place called Gibsons on the Sunshine Coast, which is the west coast of Canada. And we're in the middle of April here, or just starting, and it's a beautiful spring day. And this gives me an opportunity to talk about something which I've had in my life for most of my life. The story is really about how I changed an early love of toy trains into something which frankly has become a bit of an obsession over the years. And the highlight of this little tour is going to be my collection of two layouts, which I actually brought in from England, which I'm excited to show to everybody. But first I thought I'd let you know a little bit about what I do here. I've converted the top half of my house as my model room, and the idea here is I model in 7mm to the foot gauge, which is the equivalent of O gauge in North America. And I specialise in the British Railway period. I specialise in two periods. One is about 1938 to 1945, and the second one is the 1960s. I'd love to do everything, but you know, as you can probably see when we walk around this room, I've got enough to do, and I've got enough to do for about the next 30-40 years. I'm an inveterate collector of things I might need in the future. So at the moment I work in almost industrial fashion. I don't do one model at a time. I take on maybe 6 or 7 models or more, and then I do all the chassis for them, and then I do all the bodies for them, and then I paint them all. So a typical project can take me years to come to completion. But when they do come to completion, it's like a crescendo. It's all done, you know, and then I can put it away. And as we go around, you'll probably see I have collected a lot of model locomotives and coaches and things. Most of it you won't see because it's in boxes ready for the big off one day when this layout actually gets going. One of the things I would love to do is to finish this layout off, but it's never going to get done, and anybody who models trains knows that. It's just part of a journey, and I'm fine with that. But in the course of my hobby, I've met such wonderful people right across the globe, and had a few laughs with them, and I've certainly enjoyed my time with them. You know, I especially enjoy going to the real places that these models are based on and talking to the locals there in the pub or in the shops and establishing new friendships and basically getting the gossip. Because you'll always find some old timer in a pub going, I remember when, and then he'll bore your ear off. But it's kind of interesting, right? And it gives you a purpose. So this is this area here, which I'm sitting at now, is my base workbench, which I have my tools on either side of me. I've got pretty much every tool known to man. I use a tiny fraction of them. But there's no tool that shouldn't be had, is my opinion. So actually over there in the corner, that's actually become my office now. I actually have an office. I'm an engineer, but I find myself working up here because then when I get really frustrated with something, I can go and hit something with a hammer on my workbench and I feel better for it. And then as we come around here, this is a layout called Garsdale. This is what it's going to be, the highest station in England. It was a nightmare to build for the London North West and the Midland Railways. But I've always fancied it because it was just so bare and bleak. And I'm slowly making the buildings for it at the moment. And then as we come around, these are the cottages which go with Garsdale. They're railwaymen cottages. and there's several of them. It was actually quite big. I'll show this one. So these are just in the beginning of detail and painting. Still a lot of work to do with them. And then these larger buildings here, including the warehouse, are for the next station over, which is a station called Delph, which is just north of Manchester in Yorkshire. Sorry, Lancashire, I can't remember which, forgive me. This particular warehouse, this is my third attempt at it. I started out with building it out of pieces. Wasn't satisfactory. I just couldn't get the windows square and everything regular. And if things aren't regular, they just stand out and they look wrong. And the third attempt was actually using laser cutting techniques. So this whole shell was drawn and laser cut. And then I've been putting embossed plastic on it and stuff like that. And now we're in the kind of the painting stage of it. But there's about 150 windows in it, which you can imagine drove me crazy. And then as we come around, this area is going to be Delph. And that's where the warehouse is going. The warehouse is going out the back of the layout, which will form the backdrop. And then we have a goods shed, which is under construction, the coal stays, and the station building. Which is underway, and this is the station master's house. Almost everything here is gone except for the station building. It's all been demolished or burned to the ground. So I actually have probably the greatest amount of information on that. And when one day I feel I have a responsibility to try and put it together as a file for somebody that wants to use it one day. So that's that area. And then over here, this is the beginnings of my imaginary layout based on a place called Wimbledon in the southwest of London. And this is based on my experiences. I went to school there. I used to travel by myself at the age of 11 to get a train and a bus to go to college there, go to school. And this is my sort of reflection of my memories, and it will have buildings at the back, industrial buildings at the back of it. It was a busy through station based on the southern region of British Railways, and again set in the 60s. And then this here is my kind of painting and final finishing area. And I've got a few locomotives to finish off here. And then as we go through, this is my collection of locomotives and carriages. Some of the things I have here are for me great sentimental value. My early work was based on an article which was written by a chap called David Jenkinson. He was a specialist in the London Midland and Scottish Railway, and he actually modelled the Settle & Carlisle, which is part of what I'm doing. During the course of that, he passed away, unfortunately, and I never actually got to meet him, which was a great pity. But I did manage to get a few of his pieces, and that the engine shed over here was one of his pieces. Now the station I'm modelling doesn't actually use that, but it was too big. It was too good a chance, too good an opportunity to miss, to actually have it here on my layout. And it's funny when I saw the original pictures of that engine shed, it was just beautiful. And then when I got the real thing home, I realised that he's actually used different coloured brick papers everywhere, and there's not a lot of consistency in it. But still, the man himself did it, and I'm grateful for it. And I have some of his rolling stock as well. For example, these carriages at the top shelf here, they were actually built by him, and quite splendid. So the story about how I got some of these things, and it's typical of how I go about it. I learned that there was going to be an auction of his stuff, and I tried for months to try and find out where it was. Nobody wanted to talk about it, because I think everybody wanted their stuff. But I managed to find out, and it was at Christie's in London. And so I had an opportunity to put in some telephone bids for it. And it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea what was going on. But I bought 5 lots, and I was really excited. At the end of the day, I still didn't know what I'd actually bought, but that was fine. You know, I'd bought stuff, and I asked my brother to go and collect it, and he went over to London to pick it up, and as usual, he kind of whined about it a bit because it's me and my stupid trains again. And anyway, they gave him the receipt. He asked if there was anything to pay, and I said, no, your brother's put it on American Express, so he didn't think much about it until he happened to glance at the invoice that they'd given him. And then he realised he was walking through the streets of London with a bag saying the word Christie's on the side of it, worth several $1,000s, and became really paranoid. In fact, when he got home that night, he put it in the attic to make sure that burglars wouldn't follow him and take it from him, you know. But anyway, I got it all home safely, so that was fine. But I think that was the first time he actually realised just how much this stuff costs, and the investment you make on these things. Anyway, so that's this is my little area that I play with, and I spend a fair amount of time here. So now we're into the basement at the moment, and this is a layout called Chitor, often known as Chidale. And this was a layout that was produced over the course of about a dozen years by the Manchester Model Railway Society by about 10 guys. And it ended up as an exhibition layout, so it was fairly widely travelled in England. But after travelling the circuit for many years, they kind of decided that they were done with it. And a few years before they decided that, I actually said to them, if you're ever thinking of getting rid of it, please tell me. Because to me, this is a work of art. This is the equivalent of a Monet. And to be honest, if I come down here to have a look at it sometimes for a bit of inspiration, I kind of feel like I do have a Monet in the basement. Anyway, they advertised it unknown to me, and they couldn't find anybody who could actually find the kind of space to put this into. And eventually somebody remembered that they'd spoken to me at an exhibition once and got hold of me. And I said I'd be right over and we'll get this done. And so I turned up with my brother in a van, and we spent 2 days making massive big plywood boxes and to put these into, and shuffled them off to the docks, and they were loaded onto the ship, and a few weeks later they arrived in Canada. And I was excited to see what had happened to him, because you know, you put lots of labels saying fragile and model and all this good stuff, but you know damn well it never goes according to plan. So when I unloaded at the docks and had a look at it, one of the major containers had this massive 2 holes in one side of it, and it was obviously where the forks of the forklift truck had gone right into it. And you know, I had a real sinking heart, because you know, how do you fix something like this easily? To me it would have been exactly the same as putting a hole in a Renoir. But anyway, we got it back, and I took them out the crates and put them together, and thank God those forks had actually gone into the back of the model where there was enough space, so it didn't actually damage anything. So anyway, we put it up here, and it's got a whole bunch of little things which aren't obvious. They used what they call forced perspective, where things at the back are actually smaller than things at the front, to make it look like there's a greater distance involved. And so you'll see the sheep at the beginning of the layout here are actually a wee bit bigger than the sheep at the back. The trees at the front of the layout are a wee bit bigger than the ones at the back. And I think it's a remarkably effective and very difficult thing to do. I also love the colours as well. The colours reflect very much the countryside in England. This, to me, is amazing that it actually works. It's what's known as 2FS, 2mm fine scale, and it's equivalent of N gauge. But if you have a look at the tracks are very, very fine, and the detail on it is very fine. And it's nowhere near a train set type of approach. And to me, it's always been a miracle that this sort of thing actually works. Since bringing it back here, I haven't had a chance to actually run it properly. The setup for this layout is a lot of old electromechanical devices, post office relays, and that kind of thing, which I got some manuals for it, but frankly, they were all scribblings from a dozen men, and to try and figure out how everything was working was just, you know, too depressing. So the idea now is that I'm going to just rewire everything in the simplest way I can, if nothing else, just to have 2 tracks running as a roundy, just to show it working. And I'd like to do a couple of extra little things on it without spoiling the layout itself, including maybe putting some sound on it, birds chirping in the background, the train arriving, the guard's whistle, that kind of thing, just to give it a bit of atmosphere to it. If you look at the models themselves, the actual houses, I'm going to just put my hand against one of the models to give you a comparison of the size. And if you actually look into the gardens, you can actually tell which kind of vegetables they're growing in there. I kind of need a good set of glasses now to do that, but that's the level of detail that these guys got to. And each of those houses, those little cottages, would have taken somebody at least a year to do. And I have nothing but admiration for their abilities. Now, one of the things I was planning to do is to, in the next year or two, try and get this as an exhibition model again, because it deserves a wider audience instead of being stuck here just with me. And I'm hoping that in the next year or two we'll manage to exhibit it at the P.Eng for the, I think it's November meet. I think it's well worth it. So if anybody is interested in helping me put this together again, I'm certainly not averse to a bit of help here, and I have a full wine cellar, if that helps at all. I think the part that I really like the most, and it's probably, I don't know, I'm not sure anybody else did, but I like the rock formations. And I like the colours of the rock and the texture that was achieved. I mean, it's quite stunning in my view anyway. And just the delicacy of a lot of the things, even the telegraph poles on the lines just seem to be about the right size, and they fit into the environment. It's kind of like you would expect it to be. And the river going through it is called the Chi Gorge. Now this is actually based on a real place in the middle of England, and I think it captures that part very well. But I think before we get this out onto exhibition, I'm going to have to probably kill about 4,000 spiders and assorted insects that have probably got into this, monstrosity. So you're looking at the sheep now, and again, I'll put my little fingernail next to one to give you an idea just how big those are, and then nothing. So as part of this program, I believe there's another video which was taken many years ago when this was still part of the Manchester Model Railway Society, and I think you'll have a much better picture of how things actually ran here, and just the excitement of it actually running. I know the first time that I actually saw this in real life at the clubhouse, I was standing behind the scenery, and I felt like God. God says we should have a train coming, so I'm going to have a train coming now, and a train that duly appeared. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But of course, when you fall in love with things, you don't see the bad things about them. You don't see how much work it's going to be to restore it, and the guilt about not restoring it properly. But it'll get done. It'll get done. And I'm looking forward to showing this off, like I said, to certainly to Vancouver. And if this COVID thing ever goes away, maybe we can help the Americans see something really beautiful as well. So this is the bonus part of the tour. And this is a layout called Albion Quarry. And this was made by a good friend of mine who unfortunately has passed away now in England. He lived in Somerset, and he was a prolific modeler. And again, he's one of those guys that seemed to understand about color and texture. And he was actually a painter more than a modeler, but he was a modeler, and he had amazing talents. He passed away through the effects of Lou Gehrig's, and where his only ability to communicate was with his eyes on the computer. He was still designing his next layout and trying to get people to do bits for him, which they did. And I have nothing but the utmost admiration for the man, and I miss him dearly. So when he said that he wanted to move on to another layout, I jumped at the chance of getting this one and looking after it for him. This one was actually exhibited at the P.Eng a few years ago, so it has been seen in public in Canada, which is great. So this is about a quarry. It's a model of a Somerset quarry, and they quarried Portland stone. And these are some of the exhibitions it used to travel to, and was widely acclaimed, of course. And the model shows an industrial quarry with all the finishing works in it, the support buildings. What used to happen is that the mainline trains would arrive into this area, and they would either have 1 or 2 passenger coaches for the workers, or they would have some larger goods wagons, and they would be loaded up on the full-size lines here. Again, this is a 7mm to the foot scale, the same as I model upstairs. The mine itself worked off a narrow gauge set of lines using just small industrial machinery. And you can see the various parts of the factory which would either cut the stone into blocks or into slabs, and then it would progress through the factory, and eventually it would be loaded onto the mainline trucks to be taken off the market. And again, if you look at it, I think he was very good at identifying how industrial plants, and in fact anywhere, evolves. It starts off with one building, and then they add on to it, and then they put a different type of building on it because that's what they need. And so it's a hodgepodge which seems to all blend together. And on the other end of the layout here is actually the quarry itself. And again, there's little details on it, like for example the little oil tank for the diesel locomotives, and the water tank there for the little steam locomotive. Again, just filthy. There was no attempt at keeping it clean. It was just what it was. And then in here we have the quarry itself, where they're breaking the stone away from the quarry. And that was kind of interesting as well, because this is the level of detail that this man went to. He actually took real Portland stone and ground it down to form a pigment. And so all the rocks here are actually painted with real Portland stone. And so if anybody says that's not what Portland stone looks like, they're lying. This is exactly what it looks like. But again, no attempt to have a clean site or anything like that. It's just, you know, the object is to take rock, and that's what they do. So just a very, very short homage to this one. But as I said, it's something I'm very proud to have. Thank you all for joining me on this. It's nice to be able to share. I've often felt that our hobby is unappreciated in the wider world in many ways. It's funny how we pay homage to expensive paintings and all the rest of it. But I'm hoping that you'll join me in appreciating the stuff that I've shown you this afternoon by some very distinguished modelers, and I frankly think that they're on the par with any of the current great artists. There aren't many artists that will spend a year or two just to do a tiny model building which is perfect in every respect and captures the atmosphere of it. This isn't toy trains, this is true art, and I respect it as that. So my role really has been to act as a curator for it, because we don't own these things. We just look after it for the next people to come along. So I'm hoping that others will be inspired to do this. I've seen too many wonderful models disappear into the garbage can for no reason whatsoever. So I'm hoping other people could recognize this and perhaps secure some of these treasures that we have. But anyway, again, thank you very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to show off these things, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And if anybody ever wants to get in touch and drink warm beer and eat bad food with me, I'm totally up for it. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.